See beautiful sunset. Hello guys. So now before you log in again, I'll rap to you. Dobra, pora lecieć, szacuneki znikam. Choć nie chciałem, zawstydziłem nawet tu cezika. Dajcie dobry hajs na akcję, nie róbcie kpiny. A jak chcecie kupić farbę, to u Pauliny. Psychologia. I nie wiem dlaczego. Jesteście? So, if you are here, just please write. I remember when I was learning how to stream like 3 or 4 months ago, before the COVID even started. I used to launch and talk to myself with 0 viewers. And then we had this wonderful pandemic and hundreds of people started to attend. It was such a wonderful experience for me from this perspective. So I felt very similar a moment ago. So Julia is here, so we can continue, we can start. So in a moment, I will tell you about how to implant false memories. A very practical, one of the best practical parts of this whole series of lectures. How to implant false memories. So inception. I'll give you a very precise information how to put pressure on people. So we'll talk about false memories. A very, 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 very important thing. And extremely important, I think. So, but before that, I would like to ask you, Julia, to memorize as many objects as you can, okay? So I will give you 10 seconds to look at the list and remember as many objects as you can. Okay, and now Julia, please, or anyone else, please to write them down. It can be in Polish, not necessarily English. Write down the names. And Martyna, you also. Write what you remembered. If you remember nothing, just write nothing. I don't know where I am. I don't know who I am. I remember broccoli. It's just an illustration, but okay. No one's writing anything. Okay. So I will stop singing again. What was the third part? Chciałbym kończyć, ale ciągle brak wersetów 6. Oh, Julia responded. Great. So, broccoli, marchewka, sofa, kotek, miska, pasta do zębów, słuchawki, banany. Okay. Quite an impressive memory. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 objects. And magnet, penseta, okay, and Martyna said balloon, marchewka, broku, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So another list for you, okay? So watch it closely. Another list. Oh, now another list. Okay, before you start, I will give you three clues. 3 cues. You can use these cues. and write down as many as you remember. Okay, are you writing? Should I? Do you wait for me to sing before you start to write? A na koniec wam pokażę Wojtka Fiodorczuka. Kocham tego typa, chciałbym mieć z nim wnuka. Okay, and immediately you start writing. So you never do anything for free. I just need to pay you for your activity with my singing. Julia, bottle of beer. This is what you remembered. Okay. Oh, Julia, you were quite good at this turn. There are not enough people here to draw any conclusions from this experiment. With two persons, two individuals, two participants. Yeah, I know that you have this lag, but okay. So, was it easier for you to recall when I give you cues, or was it the same, or was it more difficult? Because now we'll talk about some important characteristic of our memory that's related to giving cues to people. But the best one, yep, I lost my connection again. Julia lost her connection. Sorry to hear this. Nowadays, in our modern world, you should buy the best internet that is there available, because it will be the absolutely fundamental resource that we can have. More difficult with cues, exactly. So the idea is that parallel queuing effect is what we're talking here about. Is that when you want to get as much information from another person as it's possible. Looks like I was singing a lot, really. You should go back and watch it later. My live singing of my favorite Hot 16 challenge to some. Have I already mentioned that I recorded Hot 16 challenge song? I have. So the best video that's available on our on the Polish channel. So our Polish channel. So the idea is that in many cases, when we want to help someone recall something, we tend to provide them with cues, and yeah, and we think that it will help them, but it shows that it's not helping. It's not helping because why? We know why. Because generally when people try to remember something, they self-generate a certain structure of cues, of ideas, of organization of the material that helps them to memorize it better. It's spontaneously generated or intentionally. And when we provide people with cues, we just destroy their own approach, their self-generated cues that people generate, right? So eyewitnesses, like research shows, provide better quality feedback with no cues, right? After the person is completely depleted of information, you can give some more clues. But at the initial level, it's really harmful. So if you want to know something from someone and you think that this person might know this, you should really refrain yourself from providing this person with cues too quickly, because the more cues you provide, the more problems it will have. I recommend really good book, Oszustwa Pamięci. It's based on many memory studies. Definitely, there is much more to memory that we will cover here. It's also more difficult when you mention some parts of what you should remember. Okay. Julia Kruszewska, do you remember any fact from this book that was the most striking to you from this book about memory? So you write down what was the most striking fact that you found there, and we will go further. What's the best core of knowledge structure? Me. So another important feature of our memory is that it's structure around me, right? The structure around me. So we use prototypes, we use exemplars, all sorts of things. But in general, it seems that the main structure, the core structure of our knowledge is around us. We are us, so it's quite reasonable to build everything in the relation to us. How much it helps us, how much it's important to us, what it means to us, right? Now, I wouldn't be very much surprised that it's like this, but some people may not be aware how much it's like this. So and the self. So information about us is the most elaborate structure in our knowledge. It's a huge amount of data that we have in our memory. And the self is the prototype self, right? It's the prototype self against which we interpret all the incoming data. So we have the self-reference effect. If something, so we have improved memory for self-relevant information. So some people use this as a mnemotechnique. How do you pronounce this? Mnemotechnique. That if you want to remember something better, some people try to find and to produce the personal meaning to this information. They try to trick their brains a little bit, right? They try to trick their brains into believing that it really is a self-relevant, important information, right? Does this describe you, right? So if you want to remember, for instance, some steps, some psychotherapeutic steps, and in some paradigm, or so you imagine yourself being a therapist, for instance. You go and you talk with your client, and then suddenly this general abstract knowledge becomes self-relevant, because it's perceived through the lenses of yourself. Self is stable, highly organized, so no wonder that it's a very good candidate for using it as the core of everything you know, everything you did, right? It's not being selfish. It's just about being you. It's right. It's just about being you. It's like one person says, everyone in the world is so selfish. They only think about themselves, and I am the only person in the world who thinks about me, right? So, and she's not selfish because she's not like the other people who think about themselves. So another thing, right? Another thing is something we have, something that our memory has, that it's able to pinpoint and to store very precisely some sort of information called the flash bulb flash bulb memory, like in a camera. You have flash, and you take a photo during this flash. Nowadays, the cameras, even in our smartphones, are so good that we very rarely use the flash. But in the past, it was natural that if you want to take a photo, you just had to use flash. So in some cases, although our memory, as I said earlier, is not very, very precise, we have moments, right? We have this capacity. We have this capacity. Our brain has this capacity to remember all, even unnecessary information. We call it flash bulb memories. Do you remember what you were doing when you heard about this morning's crash, for instance? What were you doing when you were informed that you were accepted by your university? Do you remember this? Do you remember? I know what is it like? Is it still, are people still so happy when they are informed that they're accepted by the university? When I was applying, it was very difficult at the time. There were about more than 20 candidates applying for one place at the university. So it was a really, really good news. And I think I remember what I were doing when I realized that I were accepted by my university. I think I even remember what I thought at that moment. What was my next evil thought at that moment? Do you have some other, particularly strong memory of a particular event, right? Do you remember the you cannot remember 9/11, or you can. Oh, sorry, I just realized that. I remember this day perfectly. The day when you were informed that you were accepted by university. Do you remember any ridiculous information? Do you have? Is your brain still storing some ridiculous information from this day? Some absolutely ridiculous information. I remember that when I saw the 9/11, the Twin Towers attack on the Twin Towers in the United States. I remember quite well where I was. I was standing in the doors looking at the TV screen, and my father was watching news with his friend. You remember 9/11? How old are you? Shouldn't be remembering this. It was 19 years ago. How old are you guys? For example, I always remember when the information I need during the exam was written. Oh, the information I need during the exam was written, but not always remember the information. Yeah. So your information that on this page, in this fragment of the book, there was this. So because if we have lecture, you will remember. Okay, I remember. This was the 11th lecture, around minute 20. This is what you will remember now when you have this. You can read a book, because there is a book where you can read about this. Is your handbook. I provided it in the syllabus. But still, I think it might be also easier. Not every information is there. It might be easier for you just to watch it a couple of times, like 10 or 20. So, yeah, but Martina, it can also be fake information in some cases. Although I also do have this information. I mean, this impression that it was on this page. I know that it was, for instance, I seek for some information and I know that it was on the left page, not on the right page. I remember this when I was learning, because I don't have to learn anymore. I'm a scientist. So, and Julia says that she was waiting for Pokemons. Wow, in front of the TV, but there was only news in the screen, and I was very sad. Okay. Do you remember also anything else? But yeah, it all depends whether you really believe that it was whether you as a child had this impression that this is a personally meaningful event for you, or was it only because there was no Pokemons on the TV. And Julia says, I had a dance performance. I had a dance performance on stage and was suddenly interrupted by a man who said through the microphone that there was a tragedy. Wow, you were also 5 years old at that time, Julia? So it was like a kindergarten or something? Wow, so yeah, so it seems that it might be. Do you remember what the man looked like? You shouldn't, because it wasn't important for you to remember his face. But he was a mean guy, because it was something in the United States, and he interrupted your dance performance. I don't like this guy already. Okay, but you get it. You have this kind of information. So we call it flashbulb memories. So these are very detailed, very vivid snapshots of the moment, circumstances. Something surprising usually happens in this, and that bears some consequences for you, or if you think that it might bear consequences. If you imagine it from this perspective, and you know that self-relevant informations are better understood, better memorized, and the depth of processing is important for the remembering, then it seems reasonable why our mind uses its unique ability in this moment and memorizes it. And I don't like him too. It was your dream that you wanted to dance. And no, that it was a dream that you were dancing, and he interrupted. Julia doesn't remember much more from this day. Okay, still, you remember that you was waiting for Pokemons in front of the TV. Those were the beautiful days where you were not able to watch cartoons all day long as you can nowadays, and you really were so happy, right? You were so happy. I will watch my show in a moment. It's not like this anymore. So yeah. So it seems, right, the information is frozen in memory because of the personal significance, emotional arousal, more accurate processing. You never know what aspect of this information is going to be important later, right? So that's why you may be so motivated to remember everything, right? So it's like your mind, like your brain says, everything is important now. Remember everything, and never forget about this. Right? If we were able to force our mind to store information like this, and only, right, use it only like this, it would be so great. But as I said earlier, enhancing and promoting self-relevance is one of the ways to enhance this capacity of our mind, of our brain. So we have more effort in processing, right? More social communication, it's another thing, right, of this event. So we have sorts of public rehearsals of this. Sorry, I must send news. So because, right, another thing that you probably from time to time referred to this moment, right? It's not like this that we're talking about this for the first time over the last 19 years. You probably have mentioned this a couple of times, so you thought about this from time to time. That's why it's enhanced in your memory. But still, it occurs. It also can be biased. It can be biased to some extent. So we call it phantom flashbulb in this case. Okay, expectations are also important for retrieval. So when we want to remember something, we see a person, for instance, and it generates certain expectations regarding this person, and it makes us much easier at retrieving some sort of information and much more difficult at retrieving information that is unexpected from this person. It matches expectations. Okay, and now let's get down to false memories. Oh my God, my head is so yellow because I have the sunset here. It will boil me in a moment. It's really hot here in my room. Oh, I must open my window. Might be a good idea. So now let's talk about false memories. I really like this part of this lecture because it really shows how crazy we are, how crazy our mind is, and how many problems can be generated with our memory because we can have false memories. We really can have false memories. And this, for psychologists, for instance, it's a huge problem. For therapists, for instance, there was a huge controversy in the United States after the Second World War when psychoanalysis was increasingly popular, and people, because in psychoanalysis a lot is about sex, most of it is about sex. The main drive for male behavior is sexual desire towards mother or symbolic mother, the fear of being deprived of genitals from father or symbolically, and for women is the penis envy, right? So it's all about sex all the time. So I think that might be one of the reasons why it's so popular. And the other part is about aggression. But okay, but still Julia is writing here. There is information in this book, Oszustwa Pamięci, that we can create memories from the age of 3.5. This information was given in reference to people's false memories of childhood situations. Okay, 3.5. Let's remember this, 3.5. So you really shouldn't be, too much concerned with your children until they are 3.5. They will not remember this. Interesting. 3.5. Okay. So we'll talk about childhood situations as well here. So after the Second World War, the psychoanalysis caused a lot of lawsuits where people accused some members of their families for being sexually abused. Because sexual abuse is one of the I wouldn't like to trivialize psychoanalysis, but it very often it seems to very often be the case for the explanation of why people have certain behavior, certain disturbed behavior problems in their adult life, and it appeared that many of those suits civil suits were just discarded because it couldn't happen. It was clearly indicated that these memories were in contrast with some objective facts. For instance, this person wasn't in this country for a year or 2 years. This uncle, for instance, who was accused of sexual abuse. So it's one of the first indicators, instances where people start to think, how is it possible that I really remember this? I cannot distinguish this memory from others. By the way, do you have a very early memory that you might share? What's the earliest memory that you have? What's the earliest memory that you have in your mind? You really have. Would you like to contradict Julia, who said that it's impossible to remember anything from the age of 3.5? I remember when I was 3.5, I was with my mother and my brother in the cinema watching the horror show Poltergeist. Really, it's a fact. I remember this and I will never forget this because I wasn't able to sleep for the next 10 years, I think. I was so traumatized by this event. I think it's one of the reasons why I became a psychologist later. It was a trauma, a lifelong trauma. So, and I remember, if I were to share my memory, I remember a moment in my life, and I remember it very precisely. A very silly situation. But I remember when I was going through the stairways, taking one step, and then this leg goes to the same step. One step, and the same leg, and the next leg goes to the same steps. And I remember the moment when I discovered that I'm able to go like this, and this, and this. So one leg takes another step at the next time. I remember this very, very precisely. And I think it is a true recollection, and it must be a very early moment, because children really quickly, by the age of 3, they already devised this method of climbing stairs. So, yeah, but when this guy writes this book about memory, and he says 3.5, it means that it is the average or the usual age. But people are able. Some people may be able to recollect something. It's probably related somehow to maturation of our brain. But still, so we call autobiographical false memories, pseudo memories, honest lies, right? Because we assume that people tell what they think is true, right? So we call it honest lies. Or phantom recollective experiences. So Julia says, I'm not sure which one is my first memory, but I remember New Year's Eve in 1990, 2000. I remember also, not surprisingly, there was my parents' party and I was very unhappy. I was 3 years old. Okay, interesting. Okay, good one. Yeah, but yeah, also a distinctive event. So this the problem with false memories that but it isn't. We remember often information, but it isn't our memories. But it was said my parents, and that we can't discriminate what it's really in our memory. Oh, yeah. So you're talking about honest lies, about false memories. Right, false memories, because a false memory is a bit of information in your brain, in your mind, that you think happened. A bit of episodic information that you think that happened. We're not talking here about where it comes from. We're talking here about the bit of information that you think is a part of your episodic memory, and we don't know whether it was constructed at the day when this happened, or whether it was reconstructed later. The problem with false memories is that they are very often built from real autobiographical memories, fragments. Something and built into another quality. And as you said a moment ago, it's based on internal or your own information and external sources. So if your parents tell you certain things that you remember this, they are indistinguishable from true memories. That's why they called so many social consequences. They're indistinguishable. How do you pronounce it? Where do you put that? Indistinguishable from true memories. So it's a dramatic situation in which you know that something really bad happened to you, and you have no, and you feel it this way, but you have no possibility to check it in many cases. Was it like this or wasn't like this? Very difficult. Also, when you observe brain activity, it's very, very, very difficult, right? The same parts in the posterior part of our head, the same parts of the brain are stimulated and activated when we see something and when we fantasize about something, right? It's from the perspective of brain activity, it's a very similar part. So the brain, during fantasizing, uses these parts of brain that are used for perception. It's a problem, right? It's a problem. It's a huge social problem. If you remember that someone did to you something, for instance. What was here? 2 steps. Believing that the event happened with no recollection of any details, motivation to recall, and generation of a detailed false event representation. So there are 2 steps in which it's generating. So you can think, right, and believe that the event happened, but have no recollection of any details. I feel I did it, or you say so, right? So, yeah, and it's a special case, right? It's a special case of the generally very positive feature of our memory, as we said earlier, that is reconstructive. It's impossible for us that our memory is one-to-one. It must be stored, compressed, and reconstructed. So if it's reconstructive, the odds are high that it will be reconstructed in the wrong way. And we cannot, right? And we cannot distinguish this because our mind is not able to distinguish whether it's reconstructed or whether it's true. Because to do so, it should store the true information. And the idea is that not to store the true information. So it's a special case where something that's generally good happens to be wrong, right? In most cases, it's reconstructive, it's good. So imagine how insanely crazy information you can persuade people into believing, right? We have a couple of studies that show that absolutely fantastic information, very difficult to imagine, people were tricked into believing in. Like, okay, getting lost in a shop mall. That's something that we might be made into believing. Although when I was a child, there were no shopping malls. So if you made me into believing that I got lost in a shopping mall, it would be really striking. Being involved in an accident at a family wedding. Right? These are quite characteristic situations, but these are informations that were, events that people were trying to be persuaded into in this research. Even having tea with Prince Charles. Oh my God, it's so crazy. Of course, not in Poland, but having tea with who was the president when you were born? It was Kwaśniewski, I think, right? So that you had a tea with Aleksander Kwaśniewski when you were a child, for instance. You were attacked by a vicious animal. You cheated on a recent test. That's interesting. Or you committed a crime. So very specific information. If I told anyone, and if I took a random person from the street and I said, okay, psychology shows that it's possible to persuade most people or many people into believing, into really believing that he was attacked by a vicious animal, he committed a crime, he was involved in an accident, in a family wedding, he had tea with Aleksander Kwaśniewski, he was shocked. I think most people would say it's impossible. It's impossible. People are not like this. You cannot persuade them so crazy information. And it appears that it can be like this. And I will show you the protocol in a moment, how to do this, so that you can persuade other people into believing that they owe you money. Okay? How about this? For instance, one of the easiest, but it's for a very tiny lies, tiny manipulation, very tiny manipulation is to include in the question, to include a presupposition, right? So, what shade of blue was the wallet, right? You ask person, what shade of blue was the wallet? And for a wallet, the color seems not to be the most important information, so it's not very likely that it will be stored in your memory unless it was a very, very surprising color. In most cases, people will store information. It was a wallet of a typical color. So blue, red, black. Blue, red, or black. Or brown or something like this. If these are typical wallets that men wear. If it's a female wallet, then it might be more colorful, I think. What color is your wallet, by the way? So if you ask a person what shade of blue was what was the one, was it a light blue or a dark blue? So the person will recall the wallet as much information as the person can, and will reconstruct the color. Will just paint the memory. Will reconstruct the wallet with the color blue. And if it was light or if it was a dark, the person will say. So the person will use information. That was provided in the context, right? So we assume, in most cases, that if a person provides certain information in the context, then the person should be aware of this, and this information is valid. This information is valid. Okay, so this is what we assume in such situation, and you can take account of this. You shouldn't, but you can in some cases. If you want, and now we'll get back to this method of influencing people. If you want to incept, let's call this world from the movie Inception. If you want to incept a false event into someone's memory, then the protocol is like this. So it's best if you collect some information, some real information. It will be very important that you collect some information. For instance, from a family member or from anything. You can watch some. You can search for some information that people leave on their social media, whatever. It's so easy to get information about people. If you want to trick a person into believing, for instance, that you have met earlier, right? That you have met earlier. Do you remember it was on this occasion when you were there, right? And then we use this information. So we need to mix true information with false information, okay? So most participants will respond with disbelief. They will have no recollection of this, and it's okay, right? It's okay. This is what we need to build, because they have no real trace in memory. So it's the starting point, and then we try to encourage this person to remember. Right? And then we need to put pressure, and we need to put strong psychological pressure to this person. In these protocols, when people think that the idea of research is not to implant false memories, but it's about testing how memory works, and people are encouraged and they are influenced. Like they said that most people can remember these kinds of memories if they try hard enough. Right? And the process of trying hard is essential here. We need to motivate this person to try really hard. So, what's important in this process? First of all, it's good if we are credible, right? When this interview, this memory testing interview or memory building interview is conducted by a person who's credible, who subjected to any disbelief. So because this person is more persuasive, right? It's persuasive. So in this kind of research, when they try to implement false memories in participants, they have there are some symbols around them that make participants more trustful and more convinced that the researcher knows what he's talking about, knows what he's doing. If he says that most people don't remember, but then if they try really hard, they do remember. And so if there are books, for instance, behind him about memory, then it's more probable, right? If you say, okay, for instance, imagine that you have a scar on your body, for instance. Oh, remember this party? You must remember, because I burned myself. Remember how, all the fire, how I burned myself? You remember this? And you show the place where your skin is really burned, right? You're more persuasive in this moment. You try to build closer relationship, like rapport, with the participant. So you just establish a relationship. This is what in most cases you need to do if you want to cooperate with a person. Then you use facilitators a lot, like good, nodding, smiling. So you enhance this person. You generally motivate and stimulate this person to more activity, right? If the person is talking anything, if he or she is talking anything, if she's focused on anything, if you see that she's doing some progress, that she's doing some effort, you just try to emphasize this, you just try to enhance it, saying good, you nod, you smile. If people receive such signals from others, it's enhancing, it's pleasant. It makes us motivated to be even more active, right? So if you reward your interviewee, it's not interviewer, but the person who's being interviewed for activity, the person will be more and more active. And the reward is a social reward, like nodding, smiling, saying confirmatory things. But you also need to put social pressure very gently at the first. So, like saying like this, like positive and negative feedbacks or aims of this pressure. So you try to make more effort. You try to make this person use more effort and say things like, most people are able to retrieve lost memories. They try hard. If they really try hard. So you put pressure and you suggest that the person is responsible for the outcome. If you try hard, most people can do it. Obviously, you cannot say it in the way I said it a moment ago, but you must be more warmer and be very, very gentle about this. But most people are able to retrieve lost memories if they try hard enough. I think you can make it. Just let's start again. Let's try once more. Many people, when they do it a couple of times, when they try a couple of times, sometimes it's once, sometimes it's 10 times, and sometimes it's 100 times when they need to try to access this part of memory, and it really is there. So you start talking this kind of manipulative talk. Putting positive pressure, and negative. So you address also these the problems that the person might have. So it's okay if you cannot remember it now, right? You can go back to it later. It's normal. It's important that you don't discourage yourself into believing that you are able to do what most people can do in this situation. It's not beyond you, right? So I don't like these protocols. I'm really happy that in our laboratory we don't do such crazy experiments. We rather do research on positive emotions, and much more pleasant than persuading people into believing that they were thieves in the past. So you presume additional knowledge that you have, right? That you have this knowledge. That you mean you suggest that that you have this knowledge, that this knowledge is available there, right? It's like you don't remember, right? Come on, you don't remember which party was this? You don't remember exactly who was there? So, and I remember, although it was your friend, not mine. I was just a guest there, but I remember who was there, how many people, what they looked like. It was a great party, and you don't remember that? Oh, come on, stop cheating me. You must be kidding me. So we presume that there is this knowledge, right? That this knowledge is, and the person just needs to search for it much harder. This sounds like what your parents described, right? So this sounds like what your parents described. So we enhance whenever there is something false, but generated. Whenever there is anything generated, we try to enhance it and try to objectivize it, and by saying, yeah, exactly. Now that you told me, I can tell you, and I can confirm, it was the case. Yes, you were wearing a green trousers. Yeah, green trousers. How can you? How did it take you so long to remember that you were wearing these crazy green trousers that everyone was talking about? Yeah, I can't give you more details because they have to come from you. So we suggest that we have some other knowledge. Incontrovertible false evidence. So in this research, people were tricked into believing that they received some information about the fact from the family, and they just want these participants to recall this, right? Because parents can recall much better. And so in this case, you also put pressure towards this person. Like in the practical scenario, you can say, I have pictures of this. Come on, how can you say you were not there at the party? I have pictures. Just let me go home and I will send you the pictures. It's horrible. It's not what psychology was made for. It was made for people to work better, not for implanting false memories. Yeah, and you put pressure on the amount of information, right? Anything, you enhance anything that the person generates. So one of the reasons, one of the ways to motivate person into talking more is to use silence. This is what psychologists often do, right? Therapists, they operate with silence. They use silence more than people use in everyday conversations. In everyday conversations, silence is something that's horrible. People try to speak. So if you're in a therapeutic relationship with someone, then the therapist can refrain from talking. And even though it's uncomfortable for the therapist as well, and it just gives space to the other person. The other person is motivated more to provide more information in this case. When I was training as a psychotherapist, because I have trained for 3 years, it was a psychodynamic school of psychotherapy. I remember one session that lasted for 2 days and no one said anything. We were sitting in a circle for 2 days from 9 a.m. till I think 5 p.m. and no one said anything. Can you remember this? How well trained into handling silence we were, not to say anything. It was a very interesting experience in my life, sitting with like 12 or 15 persons in one room for 2 days and not saying anything, with the expectation that someone should say something in a moment. So we put pressure on the amount of information using the open-ended prompts. What else? And encouraging visualization, context reinstatement, guided imagery, all sorts of things that will trick you, that will stimulate you more and increase the odds that you will start making errors. So in this quite simple scenario, after I can't remember how many sessions they had. How many sessions they had? False memory, acceptance, no false memory, compliance, acceptance. So most people, right? Most people develop the false memory ultimately. Or only huge, I mean, not huge, but a minimal fraction of people who are subjected to this strong pressure did not believe that the event happened and produced very little details of this event. In most cases, 44 persons, they reported a lot of details, which didn't happen, of course, because it was bogus. It was a bogus event, and really believed that this event happened. Quite a striking evidence. And now when you think about your memory, you can ask, what really happened and was just the creation of my mind, right? Another, the last thing that I would like to talk about today is the misattribution of sources. Another very important phenomenon, also for social life, very practical one, used very often. If we have certain information, it's very important that we also remember where this information comes from, right? Where does this information come from? So, because we can have problems. We can have problems that it is related to what we talked about a moment ago, because in this case we also had the misattribution of source, because finally you arrive at having some events present in your memory, but you just misattribute the source. You attribute it to your internal structure of knowledge and to the situation, but it comes from the external influences. But so we can have situations in which we have information that's fictitious, and we try to consider it to be a true event. Nowadays, right, when we have so much information around us, so much news, right? It's very, very, very easy to think, right? To think that some things are true, although they're just fiction or a joke. We are so flooded with all sorts of jokes, and so it's all sorts of funny information, all sorts of fake news, and it's very difficult to remember. Was it a fake news, or is it true? Or is it true? Or the other way around. Some events might be perceived by us so unlikely, then we might perceive them as fiction. Although they are true, right? They are true. Some strange events do happen. Yeah, okay. And there is one way how this problem of information and the source of information generates very interesting social phenomenon is the sleeper effect. So it's very often used in political campaigns, where people are disseminating all sorts of knowledge, and people with time stop remembering where I remember this from, right? Because if it's information from an uncredible source, then we say, okay, this is an uncredible information. information that I will not trust, because the source of this information is not trustful. So I will not trust the information. I don't trust the person, so I don't trust in what the person is talking about, right? What are you talking about? I don't trust you. For instance, if it is my political opponent, if it's my political opponent, or if it's my political candidate, opponent of my political candidate, and he says something or she says something wrong about him or her, I say, okay, it's normal, it's politics. I don't care. He's lying. They're just, lying also all the time, one and another. Just it's called black PR. People win campaigns with this. But the problem is, right? But the problem is that with time, as I said earlier, we have problems. Our memory needs to process this information and to go on, right? And to go on. So there can be a situation in which the link between the source and the information is weaker, much weaker than it was at the beginning. All the metadata is much more fleeting. It's much more easy to be forgotten, right? Say, I remember this, but I don't remember why, from where I read about this. I have this problem when I give you some examples, for instance, from time to time. I have some association. I remember some fact. I remember some study. I'm like, what? Where was it? Right? Where was I reading about this? So this is used in campaigns, right? Because when you provide black PR, so you disseminate wrong information about your candidates, negative information about your candidates, then with time, people will stop believing. Well, I mean, they will have the trace of this memory, even on an emotional level, but they will forget the tag attached to this information that it's a fake news. It's fake news. It's just the black PR. They will just stop thinking about this. It's likely that it will just vanish. And this is one of the explanations why black PR works. Because in most cases, right, we know that you shouldn't be too much concerned if person A says something negative about person B because they compete. It's politics. In politics, it's lying all the time. Politics is about lying. It shouldn't be like this, but in most cases, it's about lying. So one important key element here is so for the person who was attacked with black PR, it's important that this person responds as soon as possible to discard the source of information, source of information. Not necessarily the information as well, but what's the most important, the source of information. Oh, this guy is lying all the time. They are lying all the time. You can repeat it, you can attack back, whatever. But one surprising effect here in this context is observed from the perspective of the attacker, that you need to attack quickly, early. You need to attack early. If you want to disseminate black PR, you need to attack early, and you cannot repeat your black PR arguments before the election. You should do it early, leave it in people's mind so that the association between the source and the information vanishes, and you should never repeat it later because people will immediately reattach this information with the tag, says, oh, it's a lie. It's just a political campaign. So you just can provide this information, the black PR, early, and not to mention it anymore, right? Not to mention, just wait for other people to hoping that people will remember this, and if a sufficient amount of time passes, people will forget that it was you who disseminated this information. Thus, it may be a true information. Okay, so that's this is a bunch of interesting facts about the memory, and I think we will finish here because we have like half an hour left. So it would be not reasonable to start the reasoning part of our lecture. So we will stop here. I'm sorry that we had to reschedule the lecture. I can see that you are a little bit less in numbers here, but what can we do about this? It's a very difficult situation for me also, because I really have little time in the mornings, especially. I usually don't have time, so I had to reschedule it later. And on Mondays, when our lecture was scheduled, we have meetings of our faculty. So thank you, Martyna, Julia, are you still here? Still, thank you again for your presence. It was nice for me that you were there, you were here, you shared some information about your early memories. I know that you danced, I know that you watched Pokemon. I learned so much about you today. So thank you again. And stay tuned and see you next week. Bye bye.